I met Nova when I was 15 and she was 13. The new girl on our quiet suburban street in Oregon. Her family had just moved into the white 2-story house across from ours, with a red mailbox and a big maple tree that turned golden every fall. The first time I saw her, she was sitting on the front steps, barefoot, holding a small grey cat in her lap. The late afternoon sun was sinking behind the houses, painting everything in that warm, honey-colored light. She looked up, smiled at me, and said, "Hi, you live across the street, right?" That was all it took. Something about that moment stuck with me. Her voice, her confidence, the way her hair caught the light. We became friends almost instantly. Back then, she was all energy and laughter, always talking, always dreaming. I was quieter, more reserved. She'd tell me about everything: school, her friends, her love for photography, how she wanted to capture stories through pictures someday. I'd just listen, pretending not to notice that I was smiling the whole time. Nova had this way of making the world feel bigger, brighter, like everything around her mattered more. And somewhere in all that light, I started to change. I started to realize that I didn't just like being around her. I needed to be. But when that realization came, so did the fear. Nova was younger. She was still figuring herself out, still growing into who she wanted to be, and I was supposed to be her best friend. When I left for college, she was still in high school. Every time I came home for the weekend, she'd show up at my door, knocking like she always used to, asking me to tell her about campus life, the dorms, the parties, the city lights. She was the same old Nova, curious, bright, unstoppable. But I wasn't the same anymore. I noticed how my pulse would quicken when she laughed, how I caught myself watching her when I shouldn't. I tried to hide it, God. I really did, but it became harder every time. One night, while washing dishes, my mum looked at me and said, "You like that girl, don't you? The one across the street?" I froze. She didn't need me to answer. Mum sighed. "Sometimes silence doesn't protect people, Ethan. It just hurts you both." I smiled faintly, pretending to shrug it off. "It's fine, Mum. I don't want things to get weird. I don't want to lose her." She didn't argue, but the look in her eyes said she understood too well. Years passed. I kept quiet. Nova started dating a few guys here and there, normal high school stuff. She'd tell me about them, sometimes asking for advice, sometimes just to talk. And every time she did, I'd smile, say the right things, and then go home to fall apart in silence. I told myself I could live with that loving her from a distance was better than not having her at all. Then Ryan, my younger brother, entered the picture. Ryan was everything I wasn't: funny, confident, outgoing, the kind of guy who could charm anyone without even trying. We were close, but there'd always been a quiet rivalry between us. Sports, grades, attention, you name it. But when I realized he was interested in Nova, something inside me just cracked. He came into my room one night, grinning ear to ear. "Hey, Ethan, I think Nova might like me. I'm gonna ask her out this weekend." I forced a smile. "That's great, man. Go for it." It took everything in me to say those words. That night, I went for a long walk under the streetlights. The air was cool, leaves crunching under my shoes. I thought about every little moment I'd had with Nova, her messages, her laughter, the photos she'd send me just to ask, "Do you think this one's good?" I realized I had spent years waiting for a moment that would never come, and in trying to protect what we had, I'd already lost her. A week later, they were officially together. I remember the first family dinner they showed up to as a couple. Nova sat next to Ryan, her hand resting on his, smiling like she always did. My mom looked at me from across the table, not saying a word, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. I laughed, told stories, acted like everything was fine. But that night, standing alone at the kitchen sink, the water kept running long after the dishes were clean. I just stood there, staring at my reflection in the window, feeling empty. After that, I started keeping my distance. I worked extra hours, stayed at school longer, did anything to avoid being home. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't escape the thought of her. Then one evening, she showed up again. Same porch, same soft knock on the door. She was wearing a thick coat, holding a cup of hot chocolate. "Ethan," she said, "you've been avoiding me." I laughed awkwardly. "Just busy, you know. Life." She sat beside me, quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I miss how we used to talk. Feels like you're somewhere else now." I wanted to tell her that I wasn't somewhere else, that I was right there, drowning in every word she said. But all I managed was, "People change, Nova. That's just life." She sighed. "Yeah, I guess so. I just hope not too much." And right then, before I could think of what to say, Ryan called from inside the house. "Hey, babe, you ready to go?" She stood up, gave me that same warm smile, and said, "I'll see you later, Ethan." I watched her walk away, her figure fading under the streetlight. That was the night I realized my confession would never happen. I thought staying silent was the right thing to do, that loving quietly meant loving purely. But I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect love, it kills it slowly, one unspoken word at a time, and that's how it all began. When Nova and Ryan started dating, I tried to convince myself it was okay, that it was a good thing, even. She was with someone kind, someone I trusted, someone from my family. But every time I saw them together, laughing, holding hands, leaning into each other, something inside me twisted painfully. At first I played my part well. I smiled, supported them, acted like the mature older brother. I kept telling myself, "Ethan, you're doing the right thing. You're not being selfish." But the more I tried to seem fine, the more it felt like I was strangling my own heart. The worst part wasn't jealousy. It was guilt. Guilt for having loved her. Guilt for still loving her. And guilt for hating myself because I couldn't stop. Ryan would come to me sometimes, asking for advice, things like, "What should I get Nova for our anniversary? Or do you think it's too soon to say, I love you?" I'd smile, nod, play the role of the supportive brother. "Say it," I told him. "She'll love it." But every word I spoke burned my throat. One evening, after dinner, Mum pulled me aside in the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of dish soap and roasted chicken. She said softly, "You don't have to pretend with me, Ethan." I shook my head. "I'm fine, Mum." She looked at me for a long time, the kind of look only mothers have, the kind that sees right through you. "Doing the right thing can hurt," she said, "but don't punish yourself for being a good man." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of cars outside. Nova's laughter echoed in my head, her laughter when she was with Ryan. Every memory that once felt warm now only made me feel lost, and for the first time in my life, I let myself feel the pain. I wasn't hurting because I'd lost a girlfriend. She was never mine to lose. I was hurting because I'd lost what could have been. Something that might have been everything. If I'd just had the courage to speak sooner. Time passed. Their relationship grew serious. Family dinners now always included her. Ryan telling stories, Nova laughing, my parents glowing. I'd sit there smiling too, but inside I felt like someone standing outside a window, watching a party they were never invited to. Dad adored her, said she brought warmth into the family. Mum loved her too, though I could see the sadness in her eyes whenever she looked at me before long. Nova truly became part of the family. She helped my mum cook, helped me clean the dishes, took Christmas photos with Ryan by their second year together. Everyone thought they'd get married, except me. I had stopped hoping. I started working more, going out, dating other women, trying to let Nova fade into the background of my life. And for a while, I thought I'd succeeded. But I was wrong. One rainy evening, Ryan showed up at my apartment. His clothes were soaked, his eyes red, his voice rough. He dropped onto my couch, hands trembling. "She's gone," he said. "What do you mean, gone?" I asked. "Nova broke up with me. Said she needs time. Said she's not sure anymore." He let out a bitter laugh. "What the hell does that even mean, not sure?" I stayed quiet. "I know you loved her, man." "I'm sorry." Ryan laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Yeah, but you know what's worse?" He looked up at me, eyes dark, voice like a punch. "She said she loves you." I froze. "What? She said she loves you? That she's loved you for years but tried to forget. And you know what else? Mum and Dad knew. They knew and didn't tell me. Said they didn't want to cause drama." I sat there in disbelief. I hadn't told Nova a single thing. I'd buried it all years ago. "Ryan, I swear, I didn't." He cut me off. "You don't have to swear. I'm not saying you stole her. I'm saying she was never really mine." His voice cracked. "I was just the replacement, Ethan." The air felt heavy, like the oxygen had been drained from the room. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know she felt that way." Ryan stood, laughed bitterly. "You can have her. I'm done." Then he walked out. I sat there, listening to the rain tapping against the window. Nova loved me. After all this time, she still loved me, and all I could think was, why now? The next morning, my phone rang. It was Nova. Her voice trembled. I didn't mean for Ryan to find out. But I couldn't keep lying anymore. "Nova," I said, my heart pounding, "why did you tell him?" "Because it's the truth," she whispered. "Because I've loved you for so long, Ethan." I stayed silent for a moment before answering slowly, "Nova, I don't feel that way anymore." There was only breathing on the other end, then a quiet, broken laugh. "You're lying," she said. "No," I said softly. "I did love you, but I had to let go." She started to cry, her voice cracking through the phone. "We could have been so happy, Ethan. Why didn't you ever say something?" I closed my eyes. "Because it wasn't the right time. And then it became too late. So this is really it?" She asked. "Yeah," I said. "You and Ryan are family. I can't cross that line." Silence. Then, softly, "I wish things were different." "So do I said. Then the line went dead. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ryan's messages came one after another, angry. heartbroken. You threw away the only person who truly loved you. I gave her up for you. And you didn't even want her. You're a coward. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because no words could make anything better. The next morning, I saw him at our parents' house. He wouldn't look at me. Ryan, I started. I didn't want this to happen. He turned, eyes red. You didn't have to want it. You still got everything, and I got nothing. Don't make this a competition, I said quietly. No one's winning here. He gave a bitter smile. You always win, Ethan. I wanted to scream that he was wrong, that I'd lost more than he could ever know. But all I said was, you have every right to be angry, but don't twist the truth. I didn't take her from you. The only thing I did was step away. He stared at me, cold and tired. Maybe you're not as good a man as you think you are, he said, then walked out. The door closed behind him, and in that silence, I realized something. Doing the right thing doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you lonely beyond words. Time passed, and Nova and my brother grew closer, closer than I was ready for. At first, I brushed it off. They were the same age, part of the same circle, always hanging out together. It felt harmless. But then I started noticing things, the way her eyes lit up when he spoke, how her laughter came a little too easily when she was around him. There was something between them, something I used to believe was only ours. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. They're just friends, I kept repeating. But every time I saw them walking side by side, every time I caught that spark in her eyes, it twisted something inside me. I didn't blame anyone. Nova was never mine, and my brother didn't betray me. Still, it's almost unbearable to watch someone you once loved find happiness, especially when that someone is your own brother. Then one day, they made it official. The family found out. Everyone was happy, except me. My mum hugged him. My dad made jokes. The room filled with laughter. And I stood there, smiling like I was part of it. I shook my brother's hand, congratulated him, said all the right words. But inside, I felt empty. That night, lying awake in the dark, I knew what I had to do. Bury whatever I still felt, lock it away, and move on. I started avoiding them. I stayed late at work, took weekend shifts, volunteered for business trips I didn't even need to go on. Anything to keep me away. Every time I came home and heard Nova's voice in the kitchen, laughing with my mum, helping her cook, it felt like I didn't belong in my own house anymore. Mum noticed. She always did. One night, she came out to the porch where I was sitting alone, staring into the dark. She placed her hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "You're doing the right thing, son." Some feelings, when handled with kindness, never turn into mistakes. I nodded, though her words didn't make it hurt any less. I told myself that time would heal everything, that one day I'd wake up and feel nothing. But time has a cruel way of moving slow when you're trying to forget. Whenever they fought, Nova would text me, "Can I talk to you for a bit? I just need someone to listen." And even though I knew I shouldn't, I always said yes. I'd sit there, listening as she vented about my brother, trying to sound neutral, pretending I didn't care. But every word she said cut a little deeper, because even then she still came to me, not out of love, but because I was safe, familiar, the one who never stopped listening. Then one night, my brother showed up at my door. He looked wrecked, like he hadn't slept in days. "We broke up," he said, voice low and raw. I froze. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, guilt, pity. I just stared at him, waiting for more. She told me she loved you, he said. My breath caught. He kept going, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. She told Mom and Dad to... They said you used to have feelings for her. Guess you hid it pretty damn well. I exhaled slowly. I did, I admitted. But that was a long time ago. It's over now. He just laughed. That kind of laugh that doesn't sound like laughter at all. You're lying. You're not the kind of guy who just lets go. I didn't argue, because he wasn't wrong. But saying it out loud wouldn't change anything. He left without another word. The sound of the door closing behind him felt heavier than it should have, like a full stop on something we'd never get back. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying everything. The laughter, the long talks, the quiet glances that used to mean everything. Maybe it was always supposed to end this way. Maybe she was never meant to stay. Maybe her purpose in my life was just to teach me how deep someone can leave a mark, and how empty it feels when they go. But it wasn't just Nova I was losing. It was my brother too. After that night, he stopped talking to me. The distance between us turned into silence, the kind that filled every room we were in. Family dinners became quiet, awkward. Mum tried to pretend everything was fine, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew the damage was done. Nova stopped coming round. Mum missed her. She's such a good girl, she said one night, setting the table for just 3 again. I forced a smile. I couldn't tell her the good was exactly what made everything so painful. Weeks passed. Then one night, I got a message from Nova. I'm sorry. For everything. I stared at it for a long time. I typed, deleted, typed again. At first I wrote, don't worry, it's in the past. Then I erased it. Wrote, I hope you're happy. Erased that too. In the end, I just sent a single period. A tiny dot to end everything. Our story, our mistakes, our silence. Outside, it started to rain. The streets shimmered under the streetlights. Everything blurred like an old photograph. And for the first time, I understood something my mum once said. Not every feeling is meant to be acted on. Some exist only to remind us we're human, capable of loving, even when we can't have dot, and sometimes, loving someone the right way means learning how to walk away. The house felt different after that, quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. There was no more laughter coming from the living room. No smell of Nova's baking drifting through the hallway on Sunday afternoons. Mum still cooked, Dad still worked late, but everyone moved slower, softer, as if we were all walking around something fragile, and me. I just felt empty. Mornings were the hardest. I'd wake up, stare at the ceiling, and realize there were no texts from Nova asking how my day was. No calls from Ryan about grabbing a beer or shooting hoops. It was like they both disappeared, leaving behind an echo I couldn't get rid of. Sometimes, at night, I'd drive aimlessly through Portland, past the bridges, through the rain-soaked streets, headlights blurring against the wet asphalt. I'd let the radio play whatever it wanted, not really hearing a thing. I just needed the noise, something to fill the silence that had taken over my life. And in that silence, I kept asking myself, did I do the right thing? If I had confessed my feelings years ago, maybe everything would have been different. But if I had, maybe Ryan would have been the one breaking instead of me. There were no right answers. only different kinds of pain. One night, Mum sat next to me on the porch, both of us wrapped in old blankets. She sipped her tea, watching the faint fog roll through the yard. Then she said softly, "You know, sometimes the best person for you is the one you're not allowed to love." Her words hit harder than I expected. She turned to me, her voice warm but steady. "If it was real, son, if it was love, you won't regret it, even if it didn't last. What matters is you didn't let it turn into something ugly." I nodded, though the ache inside didn't ease, because sometimes doing the right thing hurts more than doing the wrong one. After that night, I started trying to live again, not just exist. I picked up my old camera and signed up for a photography course I'd dropped years ago. I went out with friends, took small trips, met new people. Not to forget Nova, but to remember who I was before her. Sometimes I'd pass by the cafe she used to love. Once or twice, I saw her sitting by the window, hair tucked behind her ear, laughing with friends. We'd catch each other's eyes, exchange a polite smile, nothing more. That was enough. We had both learned how to be strangers with shared memories. Ryan eventually moved out. He stopped coming by the house for a while. Then, one night, I got a text from him. "I'm not mad anymore. I just need time," I replied. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." We didn't talk after that, but there was something unspoken, a quiet understanding that neither of us won and neither of us really lost. We just survived. Months passed. Life settled back into something that looked like normal. The pain dulled, the memories softened. But every now and then, when I drove through a familiar street or heard a song from those years, it all came rushing back, not to hurt me, just to remind me, a year later. I ran into Nova at a small art exhibit downtown. She was standing near a photo of the Willamette River at dusk, her hair pulled back, wearing a beige dress that made her look effortlessly calm. When she turned and saw me, she smiled. "Ethan," she said quietly. "It's been a while." "Yeah," I said. "You look good, so do you." There was a brief pause, the kind that feels full but not heavy. She glanced at the photos on the wall. "You always had a special way of seeing the world," she said. "I'm glad you didn't lose that." I smiled. "And you always had a way of making it worth seeing." For a moment, neither of us said anything. There wasn't anything left to say. Whatever we'd been, friends, almost lovers, something in between, it had run its course. All that was left was gratitude for what it once was. As she walked away, I watched her fade into the crowd, her hair catching the soft gold of the gallery lights, and I realized Mum had been right. Not every love is meant to be kept. Some are meant to shape you, to teach you how to let go. That night, back home, I opened an old notebook I hadn't touched in years and wrote one simple line: I loved, I lost, and I learned to live again. Then I closed it, turned off the light, and lay there in the dark, not healed, not whole, but finally free. After that art exhibition, I thought everything had truly ended. Nova went her own way, and I kept living mine, simple, steady, and quietly hollow. But like a stubborn echo, she still lingered in the corners of my thoughts. Not because I still loved her, but because some people leave marks that time can't wash away. I started writing more. Not letters I'd ever send, just words that stayed locked in a notebook on my desk. Writing became my way of remembering and of forgetting. One night, I wrote, "Some relationships don't end with a breakup. They fade in silence, long enough for both to understand it's time to let go. That winter in Portland was colder than usual. Snow fell gently over the rooftops, painting the streets white. I sat in a small cafe, sipping hot latte, watching people hurry past outside. Life moved on, indifferent to anyone's sorrow. Pain doesn't disappear, I realized. It just becomes quieter, like a river buried beneath ice, still flowing, still there. One evening, Ryan called. His voice was calm, no longer bitter. "You free tonight? Grab a drink." We met at the old bar we used to haunt, the place where we'd talked for hours about work, love, and the future. He looked different, older, steadier, a little tired, but peaceful. "I switched jobs," he said. "Been seeing someone new." I smiled, raising my glass. "Good for you." He hesitated, then said softly, "I used to hate you, Ethan, a lot. But now, maybe if I were you, I'd have done the same." "I never wanted things to turn out this way," I said quietly. "I know," he nodded. "We're fine now. I think we both are. As for Nova," he trailed off, eyes on his drink. "She's moving." "Seattle, really?" I asked, my chest tightening. "Yeah, new job. She said she wants a fresh start." I didn't say anything. My heart beat faster than I wanted it to. That night, I drove down the street where Nova and I used to walk. The trees were bare now, branches reaching into the cold night air. I parked by the curb, rolled down the window, and breathed in the sharp winter chill. I didn't want her back. I didn't even want closure. I just wanted to see her once more, not to talk, not to explain, but to say goodbye for real this time. The next day, I called her. Her voice was calm, familiar. "Ethan, it's been a while. I heard you're leaving." She laughed softly. "Yeah, new job, new beginning." "That's great," I said. "I'm happy for you." There was a pause. Then she asked, "Would you like to meet?" "Before I go?" I didn't hesitate. "I'd like that." It was raining when we met, a light drizzle falling over the riverbank, where I had once realized I loved her. She wore a grey coat, her hair tied back neatly, her face serene. "You look well," she said. "So do you." We walked along the river in silence, listening to the rain and the slow rush of the water. After a while, she stopped and looked at me. Her eyes were gentle but steady. "Ethan," she said quietly, "I used to think we lost each other because we were scared. But now I think we just found the right paths, just not the same one." I nodded. "I think so too." She smiled, glancing at the misty sky. "I did love you. Maybe, in some small way, I still do. But I don't want to go back. I just want to thank you for letting me leave the right way." Something in my chest loosened. "Thank you," I said softly, "for teaching me that love isn't always about holding on." We stood there, in the rain, without saying another word, both knowing this was the end, and strangely, it didn't hurt. It just felt peaceful when she finally walked away, her figure blurred into the rain. And I realized sometimes love doesn't end with tears or promises. It ends in quiet acceptance when two people are finally strong enough to say goodbye, without breaking. After Nova left Portland, life slowly settled back into something that looked like normal, at least on the surface. I went to work every day, came home late, ate dinner alone, sometimes grabbed a beer with Ryan, talking about nothing in particular. From the outside, everything looked stable, calm. But inside, there was a quiet emptiness, a space that used to belong to something, or maybe someone that I hadn't quite learnt to let go of. Some nights, I found myself driving out to the riverfront, the same spot where I'd last seen Nova. Portland at night has this strange loneliness to it. The city hums softly in the distance, lights reflecting off the water, the wind rustling through the trees, and somewhere far away, a train horn drifts through the mist. I'd park my car, turn off the engine, and just sit there, listening to the rain against the windshield. And for a moment, I'd see her again, the way she looked that night, her eyes full of sadness and clarity. She was gone, but her presence still lingered in the air. Like a song I couldn't stop humming, Ryan seemed to move on faster than I did. He started seeing someone new, a coworker, kind-hearted, soft-spoken, the kind of person who didn't demand much, but gave everything quietly. I saw him laugh again, genuinely. It was the first time in years he looked at peace. And strangely, that made me happy for him, because maybe, finally, one of us got to start over. One evening, we sat on his apartment balcony, beers in hand, the city lights flickering below. Ryan turned to me and said, "You don't always have to be the strong one, Ethan. No one's gonna think less of you if you admit that something broke you." I smiled faintly, staring at the skyline. "There are some kinds of pain you don't need to talk about," I said. "You just need to make sure they don't turn you into someone bitter." He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "You always try to do the right thing. But sometimes, being too good just means you end up suffering quietly." I didn't reply, but those words stayed with me long after that night. Maybe he was right. Maybe I hadn't really moved on. I'd just buried everything deep enough to convince myself I had. Maybe my calmness wasn't peace, just a quiet form of exhaustion. A few days later, I was cleaning my apartment when I found an old notebook tucked in a drawer, one I hadn't opened in years. It was filled with notes and letters I'd written about Nova but never sent. The pages were yellowed, the ink smudged in places. I sat down and started reading. Some entries made me laugh, the way I'd described her smile, or the way I thought our lives might someday intertwine. It all seems so naive now, like a memory from another life. But then I reached a few pages that hit harder, words I'd written when I was trying to let go, when I was torn between what I wanted and what I knew was right. I realized then that even silence leaves a kind of scar. On the very last page, I picked up a pen and wrote a single line. "In the end, we don't really lose people. We just learn to love them differently, from a distance, quietly." I closed the notebook and set it aside. For the first time in a long while, I felt lighter. It wasn't happiness, not exactly, more like acceptance, calm and quiet, like the air after a storm. A few months later, I got a postcard. No return address. Just a short message. "Seattle still rains the same way. I hope you found your peace." Signed, and I sat there for a long time, just staring at it. And for the first time, I smiled, not because I missed her, but because I didn't hurt anymore. Maybe that's what healing really is, when a memory finally stops aching and just becomes part of who you are. That evening, I took a long drive out of the city. The sun was setting, the sky painted in shades of gold and orange. The same old song Nova used to love played on the radio, but it didn't sting this time. I just listened, let the wind roll through the open window, and watched the light fade behind the trees. No more what-ifs. No more if-onlys. Just the present, quiet, simple, and funnily enough, maybe growing up isn't about forgetting someone. Maybe it's when you can remember them, and it doesn't hurt anymore. And in that moment, I knew I had finally let go. It was fall again in Portland. The streets were painted gold. The air carried that familiar chill, and for the first time, walking past those old places didn't sting anymore. The memories were still there, of Nova, of Ryan, of everything that happened, but they didn't hurt. They just existed quietly, like old photographs that no longer ache to look at. I was still living in the small apartment on Morrison Street. My job was steady. I'd made a few new friends, and sometimes I'd go back home for dinner with my parents and Ryan. Life had settled, not back to how it was, but into something new, something peaceful. Ryan had changed a lot. He was calmer, more grounded. The reckless spark in him had turned into something steadier, more real. He told me he was seeing a co-worker, someone kind, smart, and patient. And this time, he said, he wanted to do things right. I could see it in his eyes. The light that used to belong to Nova, but now it wasn't about her anymore. It was about him finally finding balance, and honestly, I was happy for him. One Sunday afternoon, the whole family gathered for dinner. Mom roasted chicken, Dad opened a bottle of red wine. The house smelled like warmth and comfort, like something familiar you didn't realize you missed. At one point, Mom looked at me and said, "Ethan, I'm proud of you. You did the right thing, even when it wasn't easy." I smiled. "Doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, Mom." She nodded, her voice soft but steady. "No, it doesn't, but it helps you stay true to who you are. And that's what really matters." Later that night, I stepped outside. The backyard was quiet except for the wind rustling through dry leaves. The air smelled like rain and pine. I looked up. The stars were sharp and bright, and for the first time in a long while, I felt okay just standing there. I thought about everything, Nova, Ryan, the silence between us that used to feel unbearable. I realized that silence wasn't weakness. It was a choice. My choice. Not to destroy what was left, even when I had every reason to. A week later, I got an email from Nova. It was short, simple. She said she was getting married, not to anyone I knew, but to someone she met in Seattle. A kind, steady man who made her feel safe. She ended with, "I just wanted to thank you for everything, for not breaking what didn't need to be broken." I understand that now. I must have read that line a dozen times. And then I smiled. Not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that means you're finally free. I replied, "Congratulations, Nova. I'm truly happy for you." After I hit send, I sat quietly for a while. The late afternoon sunlight spilled across the floor, soft and golden. I realized something. I didn't think of us anymore. Just her. A person I once loved, deeply, painfully, honestly, and that was enough. That night, Ryan came over. We cracked open a couple of beers, sat on the couch, not saying much. After a while, he looked at me and said, "You seem at peace." I laughed. Yeah, I finally learned how to let go without having to forget. Ryan smiled. "That's always been you. Doing the right thing, even when it hurts first." I looked at him, my little brother, who once made the biggest mistake of our lives, and for the first time, I didn't see guilt. I saw growth. I saw family. We raised our bottles and clinked them softly. No words needed, and in that silence, I understood something. Some wounds never fully heal, but they stop bleeding. Some people never come back, but they still stay in the way you love, forgive, and move forward. I don't search for Nova anymore, not in dreams, not in strangers' faces. I just feel grateful, because loving her and losing her taught me how to finally love myself. And as night fell over Portland, the city lights shimmered like quiet promises. That was when I knew endings don't always mean loss. Sometimes they're just life's way of teaching you how to begin again. Winter came early that year in Portland. The city was wrapped in a thin veil of fog, rain tapping softly on the rooftops like a quiet rhythm that matched the beat of hearts still carrying unspoken things. Ethan sat in a small cafe on Burnside, the one he'd been going to every Saturday for years. The air was warm, filled with the smell of roasted beans and freshly baked pastries, the kind of place where people came to think, or to forget. He sat by the window, watching strangers hurry by, each holding their own story beneath a shared sky of drizzle and grey. And for the first time, Ethan realized he wasn't living inside his story anymore. He was watching it from the outside, like a movie he'd already seen but couldn't stop replaying. It had been over a year since Nova left Portland. Life had become steady, maybe even peaceful. He went to work, came home, read books, took evening walks along the Willamette River. His friends said he looked better, and he believed it most days. But some mornings, in the stillness before the city woke, a strange emptiness would creep in. Not pain, exactly, just a quiet sense of something missing. One weekend, while cleaning out a shelf, Ethan found an old photo, the three of them, him, Ryan, and Nova. They were laughing, sunlight spilling over their faces, untouched by time or consequence. Nova's smile was pure, unguarded. He stared at that picture for a long time before sliding it back into the drawer. He didn't tear it up. He didn't burn it. He just put it away, because some memories aren't meant to be erased. They're meant to rest. A few weeks later, Ethan stopped by his parents' house. The place hadn't changed. The smell of cinnamon tea, his mother's knitting basket by the window, the soft hum of an old record playing in the background. She looked up when he walked in, smiling with the kind of warmth only mothers have. After dinner, she spoke quietly. "Do you still think about her, Ethan?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I do, but it doesn't hurt anymore." His mother studied him, her eyes soft. "Then you've grown, my son. Because real love isn't about keeping someone. It's about wishing them well, even when they're not yours." Her words stayed with him long after that night. For years, he had fought his feelings like a man trying to put out a fire with his bare hands. But maybe the point wasn't to extinguish it. Maybe it was to let it burn until it turned into light. Months passed. Then, one afternoon, his phone rang. It was Ryan. His voice was bright, almost shaking with excitement. "Hey, big brother," I proposed. She said yes. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that came easy now. "That's incredible, Ryan. I'm happy for you, truly." The engagement party was small and intimate, filled with laughter and music. Ethan arrived early to help set up, hanging lights and arranging flowers. When the toasts began, he stood up to speak. His voice was calm but deep with emotion. "Sometimes," he began, "we love people we're not meant to end up with. And sometimes, the ones who come later are the ones who stay forever. Ryan's found someone who makes him whole, and that's all I've ever wanted for him." The room went silent for a heartbeat. Then everyone clapped. Ryan walked over and pulled him into a hug, the kind of hug that mends old wounds without needing words. Later, they stood together on the balcony. The city lights shimmered on the horizon, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine. Ryan said softly, "You know, I used to be jealous of you. I thought you were the one Nova really wanted. But now I get it. Love doesn't always have to end the way we expect." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, sometimes people just come into our lives to teach us what love really means." That night, when Ethan got home, he opened his laptop and scrolled through an old fold of photos. Texts, bits of the past that used to feel like open wounds. He looked at them one last time, then deleted them all. Not because he wanted to forget, but because he finally could. He stepped out onto the balcony. The rain had stopped, and the city glowed beneath a sky washed clean. For the first time in years, he felt something simple and rare. Peace. No more sleepless nights. No more what-ifs. Just a man who once loved deeply, lost quietly, and learned how to live again. And as the wind brushed against his face, he realized, not everyone who walks into your life leaves a scar. Some just show you how to heal, and Nova, she was that kind of person. After everything that happened, life finally started to calm down. I taught myself to slow down, to think less, to feel less, to stop looking back. During the day, I buried myself in work. At night, I'd go home, help my mum cook dinner, tend to the garden, or just sit on the porch watching the last bit of sunlight fade behind the trees. Portland in early winter always had this quiet stillness, the kind that seeps into your chest. The cold wind carried the smell of rain, and the streets shimmered faintly under the mist. Outside looked peaceful, but inside me was an emptiness I couldn't name. Sometimes, while washing dishes or reading halfway through a book, Nova would cross my mind again. It wasn't the sharp pain it used to be, more like a gentle ache, wrapped in nostalgia. She was like a memory I'd buried deep, one I could never truly erase. Maybe that's what love really is. It doesn't disappear. It just lies quietly somewhere, waiting for the right silence to make itself felt again. I had convinced myself that I'd moved on, but deep down, I knew that wasn't completely true. On some nights, I'd glance at the empty chair she once sat in, remembering her laughter echoing through the room. And I couldn't help but wonder, if I had told her earlier, would anything be different now? One cold December night, there was a soft knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was. Nova stood there in a long grey coat, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders, her eyes tired but bright. There was something in her expression that felt both familiar and distant, like seeing a ghost of a memory that used to be warm. "Are you mad at me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I paused for a moment, then shook my head. "No, there's nothing left to be mad about." Her eyes shimmered. "I know I hurt you, and I hurt Ryan too, but I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I've been living with this guilt, and every time I try to forget, I end up missing you even more." I sighed. "Nova, some things can't be undone. Everything's different now. You and Ryan," she cut me off, her tone firm but broken. "Ryan and I are over. I tried to love him, I really did. But I couldn't. I never stopped thinking about you, Ethan. Not once." I stayed silent. The room felt heavy, filled with all the words we'd never said. The wind howled outside, and the ticking of the clock sounded painfully loud. I looked at her, really looked, and suddenly all the years came flooding back. The long talks, the laughter, the quiet glances that meant too much. Every memory I'd buried came back to life. I took a small step forward and spoke softly, Nova. Sometimes love doesn't fix things. If it comes at the wrong time, it can destroy more than it heals. I lost you, and worse, I lost Ryan. I can't lose anything else. She started crying, her shoulders shaking. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just couldn't keep lying to myself. I know, I said gently. But truth doesn't always save us. Sometimes it just shows us how much we've already lost. She looked up at me, tears glistening under the warm yellow light. If there's another life, she whispered, I'd tell you sooner. I'd rather love you for a day than spend a lifetime wondering what could have been. I gave her a small, sad smile. Maybe love was never our mistake, Nova. Maybe we just showed up at the wrong time. She smiled weakly, the kind of smile that stays with you long after the person is gone, and then she turned away. The door closed quietly behind her, like the final line of a story that had run its course. I stood there for a long time, watching the streetlights blur through the fog. Her shadow faded into the night. A gust of cold wind slipped in through the open window, carrying the scent of rain and memory. But this time, it didn't hurt. It just felt peaceful. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in years. No dreams, no restless thoughts. For once, the silence felt like release. Because I finally understood, moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means forgiving. Forgiving her, forgiving my brother, and forgiving myself. Our love wasn't a mistake. It was a lesson about timing, about courage, and about how sometimes letting go is the truest way to love. Winter in Portland moved slowly, like time itself wasn't in a hurry. The city still carried that quiet melancholy after weeks of rain, the streets glistening, the sky heavy, but somehow I'd started to love it. The chill, the loneliness, the sound of streetcars echoing through the foggy mornings. They all felt like part of a life I was finally beginning to make peace with, after everything that fell apart. My life didn't rebuild overnight. It stitched itself back together, piece by piece, quietly, without drama. Work kept me busy. I signed up for a weekend photography class, started hiking with a few people I met online. Nothing big, but in the small, ordinary things, I began to feel alive again, every morning. When I made coffee in my small apartment, I no longer noticed the empty space where Nova used to stand. That corner wasn't empty anymore. Sunlight filled it, bouncing off the white mug in my hand. Maybe part of me still remembered her, but the ache had softened into something gentler, something almost peaceful. Ryan had moved to Seattle. He was working for an interior design firm and had a new girlfriend, kind, quiet, and with a smile that reached her eyes. I saw photos of them online. He looked happy, genuinely happy, and for the first time, I didn't feel the sting of comparison. I just felt glad for him. The truth is, I don't blame anyone anymore. What happened between us wasn't betrayal. It was just life, messy and unpredictable. We all lost something, but in that loss, we gained perspective, respect, maybe even forgiveness. One spring afternoon, I drove along the Willamette River. The water shimmered under the sunlight. The breeze carried the scent of wet earth and blooming trees. I rolled down my window, turned the radio up, and let the wind tangle my hair. For the first time in a long time, The world didn't feel like it was pressing down on me. I stopped near the bridge where Nova and I used to sit for hours. We talked about everything and nothing, dreams, random thoughts, life. At the time, those talks felt trivial. Now, they feel sacred. She once told me, some people come into your life just to teach you something. Once they do, they leave. Not because they stop caring, but because their purpose is done. I didn't understand it back then, but now I do. Nova came into my life to teach me how to feel, to love without possession, to care without needing control. And when she left, she taught me something even harder, that love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go with grace. The last time I saw her, her eyes were soft but calm. She said quietly, "You're going to be okay, Mark." And somehow I knew she was right. I didn't become okay overnight. It happened slowly, quietly. Healing never announces itself. It just shows up one day when you realize the pain doesn't control you anymore. My mum once said, "You can't grow without hurting a little." And she was right. Pain humbles you. It makes you patient. It makes you grateful. Sometimes, on rainy nights, I still scroll through our old messages. Not to torture myself, but to remember what it felt like to love someone so deeply. To remind myself that those moments were real. And even if they're gone now, I'm thankful they existed. One evening, Ryan called. His voice sounded lighter, calm in a way I hadn't heard for years. "Hey," he said, "I'll be back in Portland next week to visit Mum. We should catch up." "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that." We met at a small cafe by the lake, the same one we used to go to all the time. This time, it wasn't awkward. No tension, no bitterness. Just two brothers drinking coffee, talking about life. He told me about his work, his new place, his girlfriend. I told him about photography, about a side project I was working on. We laughed, fell quiet sometimes, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable. Before we left, Ryan put his hand on my shoulder and said, maybe everything that happened was just so we could learn to appreciate what we still have. I nodded. Maybe he was right. Because without all the pain, how else would we learn to forgive each other? Later that evening, I drove home as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky glowed orange, the city bathed in soft gold. I turned on the radio. An old song came on, one I hadn't heard in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm, no more anger, no more trying to find answers. Just acceptance. Not everything needs closure. Some things are meant to fade quietly, like footprints on the beach, erased by the tide. When I got home, I brewed a cup of tea, sat by the window, and looked through some photos I'd taken recently. The morning sky, a stranger's smile, an empty park bench bathed in sunlight. They were simple moments, but they all had one thing in common: peace. I smiled to myself. I didn't need Nova to come back. I didn't need a perfect ending, because sometimes happiness isn't about keeping someone. It's about letting them go and still being grateful they were ever part of your story. I turned off the light, opened the window. The cool night breeze swept through, carrying the scent of rain and city lights. Portland shimmered in the distance, quiet and alive, and under that sky, I whispered to no one, "Thank you for coming, Nova, and thank you for leaving." Then I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the sun would rise again, and I'd keep walking. With a heart that still carried its scars, but also its strength, its warmth, and its quiet ability to love again.